Alright, so markets tried to bounce, but yeah, it wasn't exactly convincing. Hey everyone, it's Friday morning, March 20th, and welcome back to Capital Markets Quickie. I'm your host, Endrit Sella, here to break down yesterday's market action in just 2 minutes. Quick note before we dive in. Today's episode is brought to you by AMF Capital Asset Management Frankfurt. Learn more about our funds and strategies at amf-capital.de. Alright, let's get started. So, let's start in the US, where stocks actually managed to cut some of their losses as the day went on. The Dow Jones Industrial Average ended down about 0.4%, while the Standard & Poor's 500 and the Nasdaq both slipped roughly 0.3%. Now the big story here? Oil. Earlier in the session, things got pretty wild. Crude oil prices surged as much as 10%, briefly hitting around $119 per barrel. That move came as Iran and Israel continued to exchange attacks targeting key energy infrastructure. But then, and this is where it gets interesting, oil prices pulled back later in the day. Brent crude dropped by as much as 2% after comments from Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu raised hopes that the conflict in the Middle East could de-escalate sooner than expected. So naturally, that helped equities recover a bit, but not enough to turn things green. At the same time, markets are still dealing with a tougher macro backdrop. The Federal Reserve is signaling maybe one rate cut this year, but honestly, expectations are fading. After some pretty hawkish comments from Chair Jerome Powell, investors are starting to think rates could stay higher for longer. On the corporate side, a bit of a mixed picture. Micron shares dropped as heavy spending on artificial intelligence raised some concerns, even though earnings were solid. And Alibaba also came under pressure after reporting a massive drop in quarterly profit, down about 67%, which really highlights how expensive this whole AI race is becoming. Now, shifting over to Europe, and yeah, it was a rough day there. European markets were hit much harder, with major indices falling more than 2% across the board. Germany's leading index, DAX 40, dropped around 2.8%, and France's CAC 40 wasn't far behind. A lot of this comes back to the same theme: geopolitical tensions. Investors reacted to continued strikes on energy facilities in the Middle East, while also digesting decisions from both the European Central Bank and the Bank of England, which kept interest rates unchanged. And on the single stock level, we saw some sharp moves. Vonovia dropped over 12%, Barrett Redrow fell nearly 9%, and Infineon also saw significant losses. So overall, markets are still caught between geopolitics, oil volatility, and central bank uncertainty. And until we get clarity on at least one of those, yeah, volatility is probably here to stay. Alright, that wraps up today's Capital Markets Quickie. Join me again tomorrow morning for more market updates. See you then.